better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. Pac Div. You never know if you don't roll.
Matt, did you know that fear and hope are the deepest human emotions?
No, I didn't know that. How'd you find that out?
Donnie Darko told me.
Okay, right. Yes, that very large rabbit, or I guess I forget the name of his ancestry. Maybe there's not a rabbit ancestry. Is he?
Is there not a rabbit? There's a ribbit ancestry.
Ribbit. He's a ribbit. Hello, we're here today to talk about Shadowheart. Daggerheart, the new role-playing game from Darrington Press, just out last week by Spencer Stark, Carlos Cisco, Rowan Hall, John Harper, Matthew Mercer, Alex Uboldi, and Mike Underwood.
That is right. This is the big release of 2025. We have been talking about 5e clones for weeks. I finally saw someone call them Dragon Slayers.
That's a good name. Oh,
that's a better name than anything we came up with. This has the might of Critical Role behind it. It has good press and hype and word of mouth, and also one of the big four publishers. And this is a big deal trademark. All rights reserved.
I think it's a big deal because we've talked about if you want to release a game and for it to be popular right away, like on a Kickstarter or on release, you should already have some kind of audience, which this does. But maybe it can also be good or interesting and nice. And I think this will hit most of those for most people.
At time of recording, this book has been out for maybe a week, technically, the actual release. So very few people will have had a chance, including us, to run a game or a campaign in it. But the playtest rules have been out for
a year.
And we reviewed them in a previous episode.
2 episodes.
We liked them. There are changes, but Juicy Center is largely the same. The concepts and the core rules are very, very similar, but in case you were thinking that this is just like a re-release of that, that is not the case. This is polished, updated, appended, and improved. This is a very, very finished product. This is a whole thing.
Yeah. I would say my remaining big picture takeaway from our first 2 episodes of reviewing this is a narrative combat game with the various asterisks around those. We can explain what those with I think intense mechanics are for some exciting adventure gameplay with a lot of loose do-it-yourself structures. I think it's the perfect game for people who want to play a D&D game the way most people think they want to play a D&D game. I meant that as a compliment because I like the way most people are thinking. This is what a D&D game should be.
Yes.
Perfect. That's great.
I agree, and I'm going to save some of that big picture stuff for the end. In my opinion, this is the game that many people want D&D to be, and I'm serious.
No, like, I think so too. Yeah,
you know me to be a hater, and I'm genuinely not being a hater here. I think that if what most people like about D&D is done better by Daggerheart, and most people should really check it out. You can look at the SRD. It is, as advertised, it does a lot of what D&D, the way that people are playing D&D, Daggerheart capitalizes on. Matt, you know how...
Yeah. It's the way people talk about D&D or the way people imagine a D&D game when it's translated into a novel or a cartoon or a movie.
It clearly set out to do, and in my opinion, it succeeds at. So let's just jump into it because Matt mentioned a few things, and I normally skip the introductions of these books because they all say the same thing, but this one was interesting. Or it was well done, where it starts out by describing the game, and there's just a few things that I want to highlight. So under what kind of role-playing game is Daggerheart? It says it is a heroic, narrative-focused experience that features combat as a prominent aspect of play. Bear that in mind.
Right.
It also uses the phrase fiction first in the next sentence. It describes a modern approach to mechanics and asymmetrical design, meaning that it plays differently for the GM than it does for the players. This is a very, in my opinion, good and clear and distinguishing description of the game from sort of like a high level. I'm going to say something that is going to sound like an insult, but it is not. This is really good marketing copy. Somebody who knows how to write for an audience that they're trying to sell things to, trying to explain things to, has written this. They've done a good job of explaining the value proposition and the distinction of this game.
Someone who knows how to write copy and knows what the different types of role-playing games are. Someone who understands a lot of games, yes.
Yes. And this is something that a lot of games are missing, is they sometimes do a good job of like hyping the game, but what this has done is it explains what's cool and fun about it, but also what's different about it, right? Yeah. What's distinct. And that is, I was impressed by this because that's not done in a lot of games, and it has done it really well in just these like few paragraphs.
I agree with all of those descriptions with one sort of caveat, which is that most fiction-first games that I have read and played have certain components that Daggerheart does not have. Does that mean that Daggerheart is not a fiction-first game? No, not necessarily. However, if you're expecting some things that you see in, I don't know, a Blades in the Dark or Apocalypse World or Monster of the Week fiction first game, they're not going to be in Daggerheart.
Actually, I also wanted to hold and highlight fiction first because that is a phrase that has a lot of meaning. It means something specific. I do think that it is fair and accurate, or at least defensible, for Daggerheart to describe their game as fiction first.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Matt is correct, though, that when other games describe themselves as fiction first, they are talking about something a little different. Whether or not that's a problem remains to be seen, but Matt's right that if you are expecting Powered by the Apocalypse or Blades in the Dark or any other games that are oriented around this fiction first idea, Daggerheart is a little different. However, the inspiration is clear, or the intent is clear.
The intent is clear and the inspiration is clear. I would say if you're coming to this from D&D any edition, it has that same intense character building aspect. In my opinion, this game does it way better. It has that same intense jank. And, we love jank, where you can combine lots of things to make something cool or very powerful at one thing. It has the same, like, hey, when a combat happens, and if you've designed it well, it's going to be cool. I think it's easier to do in Daggerheart.
Yeah.
To be clear, two things it doesn't have from D&D is I don't think it would work well for like a extended dungeon crawl in that simulationist sense, like an old school dungeon crawl, because again, it's fiction first. So that's not a bad thing, but that is like maybe the one thing it drops from D&D. And is there anything else that drops from D&D? Maybe that's probably it.
I think that's the big one. Again, this is end of the episode stuff, but the only, I think, audience or need that it doesn't meet as well as perhaps 5th edition is purely like certain types of heavy tactical combat, or like Matt said, simulationist dungeon crawling. But I also think that there are other games that do that better than 5e. And if that's what you want, then really you ought to be looking at like Shadow Dark or Draw Steel or something like that. But
and this is a narrative combat game. The tactics are found within those narrative abilities, and there are still tactics. It's just not about moving people around a board. And I don't think most people like that. Lots of people do, but I don't think most people do. At least people who are new to role-playing games.
I like that, and I enjoy some of that in my TTRPGs, but if I really want to like move miniatures around these days, I'll play Kill Squad or Trench Crusade or something, right? Like they're board games that recreate that really well. In my RPGs, I'm no longer looking for that. I was thinking about this as I was unpacking my beautiful Daggerheart box. If I say carcinization, does that mean something to you, Matt? How
like things become a crab?
become a crab, right?
Yeah.
Like different evolutionary paths have led to crab, right? They have different evolutionary roots, but they're all crab. A Daggerheart is if the same crab had card games as the root, right? When Gygax was and Arneson were designing D&D, every person who's going to play that game played war games, right? Every single person who was going to play D&D probably had played not just war games, but the exact war games that Gygax and Arneson were playing.
Yeah.
These days, very few people relatively play war games. The root of...
But everyone's played Gloomhaven or Hearthstone or Marvel
Well,
Snap.
everyone's played Pokemon or
right.
like Magic the Gathering, right? Like, and this isn't exactly like that, but you have a lot of cards that are designed and look a lot like Magic the Gathering cards, and in that they contain information in the same way. Does that make sense, Matt? Like
Yes.
you are sort of building a deck, and we'll get to this when we talk about domains, but really what it's about is like the cards communicate information in a similar way to like a Magic the Gathering card do. And this, I think, is a good idea. I think rooting the game in something that is more familiar to modern players is going to make it more accessible. That's why there are rules for tactical combat and rulers and shit if you want that, but it's not built into the game.
I will second the card thing and say that to me, and if you're like, I hate cards, I think that's stupid. Fine, you do you. You don't actually have to use them. The full rules are in the book. You can write down everything that's on a card on a character sheet. They don't take up much room. They're smaller than D&D spells, and you would never need the cards, but they're so beautiful, and they come with the PDF and the rule book for only $60. It's the full book. Why wouldn't you? Anyway,
Why wouldn't you?
because the whole character creation system from the like one play test I have run through, it works so well. It's so easy to make a character, yet it's not one of those playbook games where you just check 3 boxes on your sheet and then you've made your character. It is still very, very rewarding from like putting together a little puzzle of interesting things, but also making a character that has depth and personality.
We've talked about this before. Like the sign of a good game of one that's well designed is when I like want to like I'm designing characters in my head as I'm like reading it, which doesn't always happen. I don't always get excited about it, but I was reading Daggerheart and I just immediately started thinking about little guys I would want to play or NPCs I would want to build. It was so easy to sort of like see interesting combinations and cool ideas and how you would like build that out. Matt keeps saying jank, and he's right. Call it crunch if you want, but like there's a really, to me, other people have different like desires around this. To me, I think this strikes a really good balance of crunch without being fiddly in an annoying way. Like there's enough for you to sink your teeth into to make a really like different character. Like a problem that many people have that I have had with 5e is that certain classes are very hard to distinguish. You can make it's hard to make a champion fighter that feels very different, or certain types of rogues, no matter like what background and ancestry you choose, are going to kind of play the same. That's not the case in Daggerheart. It's really easy to make radically different characters of the same class, and it's really cool that way. There's lots of variability.
All right. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of the system and save our other big stuff for the end of the episode, as you suggested. Yeah. Let's start with the basic system and maybe character creation. So, if you go back to our earlier episode on Daggerheart, the system, the core mechanic is exactly the same. Players roll 2d12 in different colored die. One is hope and one is fear. The total, they'll usually add another die or a bonus to this roll. The total of their roll is compared to a DC, same as in every D20 system. But because we have 2 dice, we have a nice chevron curve, and whichever die is higher gives either the player a metacurrency hope or the DM a metacurrency fear. And it also is supposed to tell you what is the consequence of the move. So you have a yes and good thing, you succeed, but a complication occurs, and then the same for failure. My first thing, and then of course, if you roll the same value 8.33 repeating % of the time. That's a critical success. My first point is that the maths here are good.
They're good maths, yes.
I went through the maths again for this. On an average roll, like players, let's say it's not something they're specialized in, they have a +1. A third of your attributes, everything's an attribute roll except for attacks, are going to have this. Or let's say it's your bad ability, but you tag an experience for a +2, so you have a net +1. The core DCs, very easy at 5. You'll hit 98% of the time. The Dungeon Master is just making you roll this to see what fear or hope comes up. Medium DC, 75% of the time. DC 15, that's a 50-50. A hard, a DC 20 is a 22%. Those are really nice maths. I think that's what the maths people think about with a D20. It's just that's
what I think they're going to get with a D20. Yes.
With a D20. Yeah.
And the really cool thing is you have 4 outcomes. You have succeed with hope, you have succeed with fear, you have fail with hope, and fail with fear, right? And these are your basic succeed, unconditional, succeed with consequence, fail but something good happens, or like really fail. Not unlike a lot of fiction first or narrative games, but with, I think, a little bit of structure around it to make it easier for you as a GM to adjudicate those things. One criticism that I have had of those types of games that is that it does put a little bit of pressure on you as the GM to come up with what happens, like what sort of consequences exist. I think Daggerheart does a lot to take other pressure off of you as a GM so you can focus on just this. I think this is a really, really good version of this type of system. We'll come back to that, but it means that, like Matt said, the curve is nice. Like you succeed as often as you feel like you should, but even when you fail, something interesting probably happens, and sometimes when you succeed, something interesting happens. Like there's never a dead roll, there's never a boring roll. Right. Like it's cool, it's dynamic, it's interesting.
This is the advantage of fiction first, is that unlike a simulation, as a more gamist simulation game of D&D, when you roll the dice, sometimes nothing happens. And then you're all at a loss at the table as to how to get the momentum back and move things forward, especially when the players are like, could we just do that again? And then why do we even roll? All these kinds of things that can be answered outside the game, but not within it. This does not have this problem. And it also, my big hang up with this when I first read it was, okay, let's say you succeed on a roll with fear. 2 things happen, right? Or sorry, 3 things happen. The player gets what they want, the DM gains a meta currency, and the DM describes how the situation has worsened in either a perceivable or maybe an imperceivable way. I was worried. I was like, so I get a meta currency that I can use to make things worse, and things get worse? Okay, that seems a little complicated, but I realized that the reason this works like this is that in most fiction first games, you can't use the same mechanic that you use for all the other rules for tactical combat. Because, Rob, if you're just fighting a horde of zombies and a giant zombie in the middle that's Cyclops or something, and you're having this fun narrative thing, if every time the players roll, which is presumably going to be almost every one of their turns, you can't have that fiction first happening all of the time. And so in combat, the meta currency takes the substitute for the DM having to do this, along with the way the initiative works, which is when you fail or you succeed with fear, the GM has an opportunity to take over. So by combining both out of combat and in action rolls to the same thing, it makes things a little complicated, but in my playtest, it worked okay.
The other thing we talked about that I was not sure about, that I now think is pretty interesting, and I think is probably, to me, the most unique part of Daggerheart. Everything in Daggerheart is interesting and applied in the way that it is new, but the inspirations are pretty clear. The initiative system in Daggerheart is, I think, truly innovative, truly something new. something cool because it's very. So the way that works is basically the heroes can kind of just do initiative as they please. There's no set
That's not
system.
new. We have plenty of systems that are just like,
No.
do whatever you want.
That's not new. That part's not new. Wait, let me finish, Matt. All right, sorry. The thing that is interesting and is new is that it switches when you or the GM takes back control when either your players fail a roll or they succeed with fear. So this means that if they have like a great run, they could just sort of like, dunk on the bad guys as long as they want. Or it means that you could really dynamically and quickly be switching back and forth. You can also, as the GM, use a fear to take control. And I think this is a really... I was nervous about this. To me as a GM, I was like, "Ooh, this is gonna set us up to, I don't know. People are gonna get mad. People are gonna hog the spotlight." Yeah. But I actually think this works really well. It is different. It is unusual, but I think it's neat, and I have a lot of respect for this. This is a really cool idea, and I think it promotes a very interesting style of play.
Yeah, trusting the social contract at the table is just a great way to solve the endless initiative debate and the waiting for your turn. And for this type of game, I think it works especially well. So that's the core system. Oh, we should note here, since we talked about initiative and we probably won't get back to it, the initiative tracker, the action card or whatever, is gone from the earlier playtests.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You really liked it. I kind of liked it. I think it was neat. I think if you want to simplify this game, getting rid of that and just doing this works very, very in a very similar outcome in the end, but you don't have to worry about any math as the DM, like spending fear for action points and things like that.
Yeah, I clearly didn't miss it. I made a note, but I forgot to talk about it. So yeah. I did like it, but it's not critical.
Yeah. All right. So there's the core system. Around that system, players have pools of their meta currency, hope. They also have HP, stress, and usually armor that they can check to mitigate damage. They have 6 ability scores, which at character creation range from +2 to -1, which every bonus is important in this type of curve. And then they also have a ton of other things. They have special abilities from their ancestry, their background, their class, and then, of course, their domain cards, which they're picking up every single time they level. They also have a set of 2 experiences that are essentially fate tags that they can spend a hope to add to any role that they apply. And these are, this is real fiction first singing here. This is where players make up anything that they want with your guidance and the rulebook suggestions.
Yeah, and they spend the character creation section spends, I think, a lot of time talking about experiences. I think this is probably going to be the biggest stretch for just straight D&D players to come up with, because you're given a lot of leeway and you're expected to sort of like come up with experiences that are specific enough to be useful, but not so specific, not so broad that they can be abused, which for people who are familiar with fiction first games, no problem.
Right. If you've played Fate before, this is the entire Fate character creation system, right?
This is Fate, right? Which is good. We like Fate. It's just, and I think we have even suggested that you could borrow or even just like staple bits of Fate onto other systems very easily. But if you're not familiar with like that type of thing, this is going to be, you're asking players to like come up with, a phrase or an idea that describes their character. It might be useful, but it might be a challenge. I think people can handle it, but I get the sense from the way the book is written that this is something that they're a bit concerned about players getting on the first go around.
They're concerned about it because they want players to have good examples. I think if they have a bad example, to me at the beginning of play, like, hey, you can always change it any time, is not bad because, again, like in Fate, you have to spend a meta currency to tag it in. So, and it's a very precious meta currency. Some characters will have more than others, but there's a million other things you could spin this on that your players will want to spend it on. So, if they're bad ones, we'll just rewrite them in session 3.
This touches on another thing that I really liked about this book is that it is rich with examples, and there's a couple of them that I want to talk about specifically a bit later on as we get to them. But I really think this is important, and as somebody who reads a lot of these books, I really prefer more, especially like examples of play. But Daggerheart is very good about providing thorough instructions and examples of everything that you need to run and play it. And like Matt said, there's a lot of like really good examples and explanations of how you might build an experience. This is good. This is a needed and thorough section.
The other part of character creation is picking, essentially, and this is why character creation is so easy. You have like a little guide that fits on one page. You go through your sheet, and then you pick some cards. You pick an ancestry card, you pick a background card, and you pick a subclass card, which also tells you your class. And there are 9 classes, so 18 subclasses, 2 for each. There are 18 ancestries and 9 communities or backgrounds. And my takeaway from this is these are all fine and good, except for the classes one, but maybe even the subclasses one. This is like real, like, hey, these are fun, and I think people who play D&D expect them. Do you even need them? Like, if you want to run a campaign where it's like everyone's a human, just be like, hey, we're not picking a heritage card. You're all humans.
Yeah,
wouldn't matter.
I was thinking about this as I was reading through the character section. I don't dislike the classes or subclasses, but I was looking. The great thing is that everything is like chunked into traits and class features and domain cards. You could, in my opinion, detach a lot of these things from the class, which is just like a package of these things, and let your players choose a la carte. I'm sure there's some ways that would break the game, but I also think that they could have written this in a way where you're just picking and choosing traits and whatnot. I think I understand why classes exist. I understand why they're in this book. I don't know that they're really like critical here.
Yeah. Let's assume that to be a dragon slayer, Rob, that you have to have all of these things, right? One would expect the dragon slayer to have classes, right? The fun thing about the classes is that when you're picking, like, at the table, the domain cards, and you share a domain with someone else, you're like not picking the same card, and that can be like a fun bit of communication. There's also, since every class has 2 domains and so shares a domain with one other class, and because like you don't have unlimited domain cards, there's also like no reason why, for example, you couldn't make a spell-less ranger that only picked from the bone thing. I think it would be just almost as effective as the other one, if not just effective in a different way. I think that's true of basically every class. And if you wanted to play a classless system where you picked the class's features and then just whatever domain cards you wanted to, you absolutely could. I think if there aren't people who didn't spend like 2 hours reading through the book, they would be like, there's too many options. I'm confused. But yeah, there's nothing saying that this needs to be a class-based system.
I love the domains. I love this chart. I love a chart that, you can see the bard shares a grace domain with the rogue and, a knowledge domain with the wizard. I love this shit. But the first thing that I thought of when I got to the end of the character creation section was that I wish that there were more character options to take a like a forbidden domain or something, like something that would allow you to take a domain card from like the opposite side of the circle or something. I think that would be really neat. So the good thing is I think it would be super, super easy to just make this a classless system. You'd have to be on the lookout for like broken combinations,
I
but I don't think like
think you
rules wise
could.
they would be very hard. I don't think it would be very complicated for you as a GM.
Let's be clear here. If you want to make and I tried this out, like a tank that is really good at taking damage, that is like almost impossible to kill. You can't, like, there are ways, the character creation, the system truly empowers you in a way that D&D doesn't. Like, your characters are very powerful, especially at the thing that you're trying to be good at, in a way. Like, I think tanking is an example, Rob. If you want to be the guy who's like, I can take it, in a action fight. In D&D, that is just eventually not possible. It's really hard. You run out of hit points really quickly, especially at low levels. In this, you can actually do that. So I think that's really good. The other thing is, like, reworking the classes. Like, they already released a playtest fighter, which is sort of a martial artist monk type class, and a warlock, which is exactly like the warlock. And other than making new domains, which they did for the warlock, you could just make your own class by picking 2 domains and getting the dungeon master to write you a class feature.
Yeah, I like that idea. I complained in our playtest review that I wanted to see them get away from the D&D core classes. I didn't think that they were needed. I complained about this in our last episode about 5e clones. I don't feel like you need to be shackled to these. I do feel like, even though this class list includes bard, druid, ranger, sorcerer, wizard, that they've actually done a good job, to me, of making these distinct from their sort of like D&D origins while still being like recognizable. They are interesting to me. The wizard is interesting to me in a way that the D&D wizard is not. The bard is interesting to me in ways that the D&D bard is not. They've done something. They've done a really good job here. They really thread the needle on this one. I'm very impressed with what they came up with, and a lot of that has to do with the distinct subclasses that are available, but also just the variety of class options and the differences in the way that they play. They've really leaned into, like Matt said, the heroic quality of everybody, and you can do some really cool things, like really, really impressive things as every class. And I think that's part of like what makes them feel different.
Yeah. Again, back to something we mentioned earlier. These classes are, I think, what everyone imagines the D&D classes to be. It's like, yes, the rogue is pulling up their cloak of shadows and, rising across the dungeon in a pool of mist, and then, stabbing someone and doing a cool walking on the walls, those types of things, as opposed to the D&D rogue, which is, I suppose, being better at skills than everyone else. And
well, you can shadow step at the
beginning,
at level 1,
right?
As
something
a
you
rogue,
have to
if
work
you want
for like 7 levels.
Fucking struggle for it as a D&D rogue. And that's like, listen, if you built a rogue so that you can literally step through the shadows, why should you have to like struggle through 7 levels? Why not just like let them do that? And there you go.
Yeah. That is this game. It is, again, it is very, very similar. I think the main thing is that Paladin and Priest, if you're looking at the classes that are released with the core game, Paladin and Priest are consolidated into one class, though I suppose if you built a wizard that only took their Splendor domain cards, you would essentially make a World of Warcraft priest, like someone in not good with weapons, who's cast
interestingly spells. And to my delight, they've actually kind of divided the fighter into 2 classes. They've done the opposite thing. There is a tanky fighter, and there is a herdy fighter. There's a warrior and a guardian, and there's distinctions between that. But I liked this. I thought that both of them had a lot more of a distinct class identity and more interesting things to do, rather than trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, no, I think the fighter is the class that deserves to be divided, and I like this division. And if you're like, hey, where's my barbarian or berserker? Just take one of the warrior's abilities and give your player the Valor domain and the Bone domain. And then,
Yeah.
that's actually exactly what a barbarian would be. Give them the subclass of the Slayer and those two things. So I like the class system. I immediately, as soon as a player would ask me to break it, keeping in the other restrictions on level cards and stuff like that, I would say yes. And of course, the game lets you do this by default at level 5. You can just pick up a new domain. And then again at level 10 if you want. You'd have 4 domains by the end of your character. And it's all fine because there's the limiting factor of stress and recall costs of the cards, and you can only have 5 active at a time, which is plenty.
This is cool. This is, again, this this gets to like the card game aspect of it, but you can only have 5 domain cards at a time. You can have more in your vault. It's like having a sideboard in Magic the Gathering. I like this. I think this is like a very like, I don't know. I know some people don't like this. I love the cards. I like having like visual things that I can like lay out and hold, and like it helps me organize my thoughts and my gameplay. I love the tokens. I love the cards. I'm a Ameritrash, so sue me. But I like the resource management is fun conditionally, right? Lots of games, both TTRPGs and video games are all about resource management. It can not be very fun if it's too fiddly, but like just having these cards and you have to decide during your rests or during certain parts of the day or use your abilities to decide what you have active or out is, to me, fun. That is a cool mechanic to balance characters, but also like have them make meaningful choices.
Yeah, I was worried that the choices, like you were saying, might lead to analysis paralysis, but I think the elegant solution, at least how it worked in my playtest, is that the stress mechanic. So you have 5 cards. If you need to recall one, you just pay it stress cost to put it back in your hand. Alleviates that, because if you're like, well, maybe I should prepare this Wall of Flame spell from this grimoire. Nope, just leave it in your thing, and if you want it, you can get it. You'll pay a cost. The players seem fine with that. Mm-hmm. Again, this only happened one time, so I'm drawing from a limited data set here, but it made sense to me. It's just like, hey, unlike D&D, you don't have to worry about, I didn't prepare a fog cloud today. What if we need that? We didn't. I'm going to be kicking myself forever about this.
Right.
No, just pay the stress costs, and then you can have it.
Exactly. In D&D, it ends up being a whole thing unless you have a class feature that allows you to swap spells or something. And in this, it's just stress. It's just, it is a resource. It is a cost, but that makes the decision-making pretty straightforward.
I think we should also mention, since we're talking about character creation, is character leveling up. It is as intuitive and easy, but still with interesting and exciting choices as character creation. You got like a little list of things. They're all good. You can't have them all. I didn't play test this because we just made characters once, but I did build a character to level 5, trying to level it up. I'm like, this seems like it would be fun. I had fun doing it by myself.
I love these little like level up cards. It reminds me of the tracks in Triangle Agency, which I love so much. I just really like how these are visually laid out. You got little boxes. You fill in 2 of the boxes every time you level up. You add your level to your damage threshold and something else. But like, it's very easy and intuitive to level up, and the choices you make are interesting and simple. It's really well designed. I really, really like how this is done.
Now I have to hit on something that I didn't like, because we're getting to the equipment and
sorry, I want to just hold for a second on
Ancestry. Ancestry,
because it's
18.
It's not important. Ancestries are great. They're a ton of like goofy high fantasy concepts, ranging from clanks, which are like Warforged, to like fungus people, to your standard elf, dwarf, whatever. These are neat. They have exactly 2 features for all of them, which I think are pretty well balanced. Matt, I have to observe that once again, halflings are the most powerful ancestry in the game,
Yeah.
far and away. You get a hope. Everyone in your party gets a hope when you start a session. If you had, Matt,
Yes.
the Fellowship of the Ring, that means that every single person in that party would be starting with 4 hope at the very begining.
How
That's
else
powerful.
can you explain these losers and Gandalf making it through all they did?
I strongly support it. I thought it was funny that, like, you know, if you're going for pure mechanical benefit, in my opinion, the halfling is the most powerful.
I think this one's a great example in that mechanic is the actually only way I've seen what a halfling in fantasy is supposed to do for the rest of the group. It's like, hey, halflings are like cheerful and comfort loving, and they make everyone feel a little more cozy and at home. How do you this makes sense? This nice party buff.
They're
lucky.
just a little luckier than everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They give everyone a hope every time they rest. They're just being their best selves. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about equipment
yeah.
and I guess combat because it's related to it? So
Yep.
I guess it must be a thing about, you know, being a dragon slayer is that you need an equipment table, and you know you got to let people pick equipment, and in addition to rolling to hit, you have to roll damage. A thing that has been simplified since the first playtest is that the like tiers of damage. So when you hit something or someone hits you, you roll damage dice, and those damage dice are stacked up against a range of 3 numbers that tells you how big the hit is. So the ultimate damage roll doesn't exactly matter. It's like, well, it's a 10. Okay, that's under the severe, but above this, so it's 2 hit points. That's all that matters. To me, a more elegant system would just be go straight to the hit points or whatever. However, I think maybe this is they have some proprietary market research that says the one thing that turns people who like D&D off is not being able to roll damage. I personally think that's stupid. However, the changes since the playtest have made the armor hit point damage threshold system 50% simpler. So that's pretty good.
It's still I have basically like a very small number of complaints. You know, one is I actually think they don't need all of the ability scores that they have. They could have probably reduced that like some of the other Dragon Slayers did. That's fine. No big deal. But like also like damage and attack rolls are still more complicated than they need to be. I do think it would not have been hard to make attack and damage the same roll. I think that would have been entirely. These are very good game designers, by the way. People who've done this are very, very talented and experienced, and they know about other games. So this is clearly like
the only reason
choice.
is they have to. Someone made the choice early on. It's like, we're going to have attack and damage rolls because people like grabbing the big handful of dice. And I did a lot of damage. And I will give them, some people do like that. I'm not one of them. That's okay.
Here's the thing. I'm so on it. But like, I kind of prefer if I'm going to get, you know, if there's like the attack roll is better, then the damage is higher. Like that makes me happy. I also don't really like the like, I think I can see like the damage, the balance reasons for it. I don't love the like, damage threshold mechanic. It's just like a layer of fiddliness between like damage and how much damage you actually take. I don't immediately like know how I would rewrite it, but it just feels like it's so much more fiddly than some of the other elegant systems in Daggerheart. It's not the end of the world. It's not complicated. It's just like another step that I don't know is really like important.
Yeah, it is. At least for me, it was a big barrier to figuring out how powerful something actually was or was not, is comparing these. Every character is presumably wearing some kind of armor, which gives you a number of, 2 numbers that give, 2 numbers that give your damage. It was earlier like 3 maybe.
You have evasion, and then you also have damage threshold, but then you also have armor
checks, right? So you can check your armor, which essentially substitutes for a hit point. I think it worked differently in the first playtest, but now it's armor checks are just extra hit points that some special abilities key off of and make better. Some damage ignores
like
armor.
soak.
So
Yeah.
I guess you can repair your armor a little faster than your hit points. It's fine.
Not bad. It's just I don't know. It doesn't feel like quite as nice as a lot of the other systems.
This was the worst part of the system, the combat system, to me, reading the playtest, and it is better than it was in the playtest, to me.
This is a lot improved with the playtest. I didn't like this in the playtest. There are all these tables of weapons, and I feel bad complaining because it's not like really bad, but I'm gonna have to complain because I just this book is so good, and I have to hold them to a little bit of a higher standard. There's nothing really like wrong here. They have tiers of weapons, and Matt, I don't know what you thought about these tiers of weapons. I didn't like them. I didn't like how this was laid out or constructed. When I say tiers of weapons, I mean tier 1 has a broadsword, which has like basic damage in it. Tier 2 has an improved broadsword, which does the same damage, but plus 3. Tier 3, can you guess, has an advanced broadsword, which does D8 plus 6. And then Tier 4 has, wouldn't you know it, a legendary broadsword, which does D8 plus 9 damage. Listen, I love this in Diablo 4 when I am, smashing goblins for hours on end, and I get a little ding, and it spikes my dopamine levels, and I have a different colored broadsword. That's great.
Yes.
I don't need or enjoy this in a TTRPG. I would rather something different, something more interesting. I would rather my weapon advance with me, which is something that
already happens in this game, right? Because whenever you increase your proficiency, your weapon die increases.
Yes.
And
I don't know what this is for, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I think instead of having, they made a mistake here somewhere in the math, at least is my judgment. Is that the base weapon table is not just damage dice, but some of them have a plus. A broadsword's a D8, but a longsword's a D8 plus 3. And then you could have, I guess, magic weapons, but I don't know why you wouldn't just make just a one sentence in the rules that says a tier 1 magic weapon, add 3 damage, a tier 2, add 6, a tier...
Yeah. Yes.
But they had to rewrite the table because some of the earlier ones also have pluses. I get that in the higher levels there are some new weapons that are kind of like named like the Hammer of Wrath, and that should be the only thing in the table.
That's the crazy thing is that the advanced broadsword, the purple broadsword and the orange broadsword share a table with sick things like the flicker fly blade and the, sledge axe, and, the Magus revolver. Really cool, interesting, unique magic weapons. And I'm like, why are these tables not just those? Why are there all these like generic weapons? Like Matt said, you could just have them have a rule that says they advance by a certain, I don't know. Clearly something went wrong with the math. This is not a good fix. It's not the end of the world. It's weird because like we just said, these exist alongside some really, really cool and well thought out magic weapons. So like, why are, I don't know.
So it also, the math for the core mechanic is like so easy. You're usually adding between like a -1 and a +5 or 6 at early levels to rolls. Very easy to keep track of. You just add that to the 2d12 for damage rolls, not to mention checking the like armor tiers. The math gets really complicated because you also have abilities that, change your damage rolls and stuff like that, which I think would be fine. But then, I think the easy solution is to make yourself at your own table. And actually, when we get the DM section, we'll talk about, hey, here's an example custom weapon table for your thing. Because actually, speaking of things that could be cut, like ancestries, you could cut this weapon table and make a new one for your game, and I think everything would be fine as long as you look at the range of numbers here. Yeah, I might do that because it's just like, man, Dagger is D8 plus 1. Like, could you not decide whether it should be a D8 or a D10? Like, that's so close. Like, couldn't you have saved us some math here? Anyway, this was, like you said, my least favorite part. If this was reduced to one page with advice for making cool, unique magic items, that would be great. You can backwards engineer it, though.
I will say, with all of that in mind, that the rest of the magic items I think are really neat, and these loot tables are really cool. There's a loot table for magic items, and I think they're all mostly like a really good mix of powerful without being game breaking. There's also a section of consumables, which I really like because I like giving my players consumables because it makes it easier to.
Then they'll never use them. Yeah.
They'll never use them, but also I get to give them something, and I can't keep giving them long swords +1, right? So like, let me give them more potions and more, wing sprouts and whatever. I really like this. I went so long playing games without proper loot tables that like every time I see an even decent one, I'm like, oh, thank God, one more thing I don't have to think about or make up myself. I really appreciate it.
It's really nice. So, like, that's the core of the character creation and the system. There's also, obviously the most important thing, like, your players have is their hope that powers most of their cool abilities and can be used at any time to power, like, a super class ability or to tag an experience or to help another player to give them a D6 on a roll. There's also a disadvantage mechanic, which when I saw, I was like, man, you could just, if you added a stacking advantage mechanic, you could just like make experiences just a D6 too and get rid of even more math. You know how Lancer has the same disadvantage mechanic where you add a D6 or a negative D6 to your roll. If you add 2D6, you roll them both and take the highest. I think that system would work here. You can only ever have one advantage or disadvantage, but that could easily be added in. And then we get to, Rob, then we get to the GM section, and we're here at an hour. So do we want to start talking about some big takeaways from the GM section, or do we want to talk about our overall thoughts of the mechanics of the first half of the final Daggerheart system?
I guess we really ought to just like wrap up.
Well, let's get to our big takeaways for the people who are not interested in being a DM.
Because the GM section is really good, and I could talk about it for another hour, especially if we're going to talk about like the campaign frames and the adversaries, which I do want to talk about. So
campaign frames, I really like these.
I could spend an hour just talking about the campaign frames. So we'll have to do a two-parter. Sorry, this is now 4 episodes on Daggerheart. I hope you like it. But big takeaways. So here's the thing, Matt.
Yeah.
A pierogi, a ravioli, a dumpling, a kolache are all like technically, right, the same type of food, right? Like it's something
delicious.
Something delicious, like wrapped in like a dough or like a pastry, right? It's all like the same.
Like spaghetti.
Not like spaghetti.
Oh, not like spaghetti.
Work with me here.
Okay, yeah, I'm following you.
Same type of food, right?
Yeah.
But like, if what you're really craving is, like a xiaolong bao, if you really want like a soup dumpling, and someone gives you a hot pocket, like that's like, sure, they're like both, wrapped in pastry, but like that doesn't mean that like that's what you want. So like, what I'm saying here is, when it comes to Dragon Slayers and when it comes to Daggerheart specifically, I think this is it. I think this is the game. To me, this does everything that D&D is trying to do, that it's been trying to like pivot towards since it realized that players want something different from what it has been for the past, 20 or 30 years. I think that people really ought to give it the the opportunity because I think that it hits all of like the critical aspects of how people play D&D in the 2020s while keeping a lot of the cool stuff about the old styles of D&D. All of that being said, I can understand why people like maybe don't want to switch. Like they really like their pierogies or whatever.
Yeah.
And but like aside from that, I would say, and I'm trying to be as like objective as possible about this. Like you know, I know there are things that I like that not other people like. I know that I have different you know, interests, but like the reason why I'm saying it this way is because I straight up have not really been interested in high fantasy role-playing games for a while. I have not had really interest in D&D or any of like the Dragon Slayers because it's not really like the type of game that I like to play these days. And Daggerheart got me interested again.
Yeah.
Daggerheart made me want to like both roll a character and start running a campaign. I have already thought of like a couple of groups that I want to guinea pig. You know, I'm like, let's give this a shot. Let's try. I think this is a really like, gets back to like the core of what the D&D experience is or has become. And it did so deliberately. This is an accident. I think that they really like, this is Babe Ruth, like calling his shot. Like they were like, this is what we're going to do. And then they did it.
Yeah, I agree. Here is my final revised big picture takeaway that is related to that. That is a little more. It's not exactly negative, but some people will see it that way. This is a BLM, a Brennan Lee Mulligan approved game, right? So at the beginning I said it's a fiction first game, but for example, you don't have a downtime move. Like there are downtime moves, we didn't get a chance to talk about them yet, where your characters you return back to their base and the GM spins a fear and it says you have to confront your insecurity with another player. We'll do some dialogue. There might be a check, and there'll be some sort of narrative or mechanical consequence. There is nothing like that, right? That is something that you exogenously supply. To me, I'm guessing this is not something people were clamoring for, right? Because the people, we talked about this is D&D for the way most people want to play D&D, and I do think people who want to play D&D don't want to have those again, this is part of fiction first but not part of this particular fiction first game. Moves where like characters confront their emotions or some story thing. I'm thinking an example of like an episode that inspired this game from the show Critical Role, either the actual play or the adaptation, right? Where there will be a scene where a character goes into their backstory and role plays that out with the dungeon master. Obviously, just like in D&D 5th edition, there is nothing stopping you from doing that. However, there's nothing supporting you doing that. And for me, I would love for this wonderful mechanic the DM has, fear, for it instead of to just interact with the world, to interact with the players' like emotions and drama. And that's not something that's there. However, if you just wanted to like use, you've come up with this point many times, having a metacurrency as a DM is an excuse to do something like that.
Yeah.
So, does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think you're right, and I think the where it falls a little short for me. And I was effusive in my praise just now, but like we already talked about some things that I would change, and this is not Daggerheart's fault, but like it falls into the same trap that 5th edition has fallen into, where it is still trying to be all things to all people. And in order to be the Dragon Slayer, in order to supplant 5e, which I think this game is trying to be, and it should try to do, and I hope it succeeds. But to do that, you do have to kind of be the McDonald's of TTRPGs, right? You cannot give the full Critical Role experience, because that's not something that is interesting or accessible even to all fans of Critical Role.
Well,
right?
There is an SRD. Someone could make this if they wanted to.
Well, that's just the thing. So I think I think so. Two things. One, I actually think the downtime move of prepare could fill that role
close.
that you're just
so close.
It's almost there. You do have to do some work, like you said, as the GM to like make that work, but like it's almost there. But this is the same problem with all like the fiddly damage bits, right? That's clearly in there because I assume some playtesters or something was like, I want to roll my damage dice. I think that makes it a worse game. Not like a lot worse, but like a little bit worse. And in the same way, not including like what Matt described as, we talked about this in our Patreon episode, like a Baldur's Gate 3 camp scene where you really like talk through some feelings and have some like character development with another player.
And there's a resolution that's like out of your hands as the game master.
Yeah.
Like your players have some sort of confrontation, and what happens? Do they side with this devil or do they not? It's up to them. You can make that, right? But it's not.
Yes.
It's not there as like a GM move, right?
So yeah. So to agree with you, Matt, like I think like it falls just short of either of these things because it is trying to appeal to as many people as possible. And that is going to be inevitably a little disappointing. We got to
remember we're in the like weird minority here.
We are. And like I said, I tried to like put myself outside of myself for this and like think about like the intended audience, like the type of players. I was thinking about my group of little nerds who really wanted to play 5e. I think they would love this game. I was thinking about my other players, my other friends who have only ever played 5e, who are adults. I think they would love this game.
Yeah.
I think this would be easy to sell to a lot of people. Like a lot of people. I think it would be easy to pick up. I think you could hand them these cards and like a character sheet, and they would immediately be like, oh, I know exactly what to do. This is so much fun. Like, here's my cards, here's my dice. In that way, it is to me, a massive success. I do really like want to see what it's like. I read some, I don't do this before we review anything because I don't care. But afterwards I did like read like what people were saying on YouTube and on Reddit and whatever.
About the playtest.
About the game itself.
Yeah.
And every objection that I read, was it's not for me or it's not 5e, which are perfectly fine objections. Again, pierogies, dumplings.
Yeah.
Everybody has preferences. You're allowed to like not want a certain type of thing.
Sorry for everyone listening to this right before lunch.
But I think that, if you step back and like, what you want is to play a game like D&D, but that is well designed and fun and works and has support for many different types of players and types of play. I don't know that there is anything better than Daggerheart.
Yeah. No. It's a very exciting game. I'm excited to play more of it. Like my big picture takeaway from the playtest was I was like, oh man, the like pools and tracking are just like a lot after my playtest, and now that they've been simplified just a little bit, I'm fully convinced I was wrong on that. The pools and tracking for characters are fine.
The other reason why I'm so like enthusiastic about this is that, and we'll talk about this more, but I can say the GM section is really good, and this is written with the intent for you to run it as a GM. I'm speaking in a very firm tone of voice because it makes me angry. Because so many of these books are not written with the GM in mind, and this one is. The second half is specifically there to help people begin to GM. Like if you have never GM before, or if you're coming from 5e, I don't know that you can be better set up than the way that Daggerheart does. I think that the tools that they give you are really good. I haven't tested it like Matt has as extensively, but building encounters, building campaigns, it's so the tools are really, really good. I think this is going to be a really easy game for people to GM, either like entirely prepless or very, very low prep. And that is kind of an insane thing for a D&D style game to have.
I'll add, I think it'll be a lot of prep before you begin the campaign and then very little afterwards.
Yeah.
And Rob did not lie when he said the second half of the book. Often when we're talking about role-playing game books and we're talking about the GM section, it's like the last 10% of the book. And no, it is
the
legit,
last fifth?
No, half.
Yeah.
In this book, half of the section is GM advice, stats, approaches, how to build examples of how to build a campaign, campaigns that are more or less ready for you to start prepping on. It's great. Yeah, I like it. And speaking of the layout of this book, for $60, you get a book that is big and hefty and nice, but not so long that Rob and I can't read it. Again, it's 300 and change pages.
It's the perfect size. This is, sorry, we didn't, the layout is beautiful. The art is incredible. Somehow they have managed to pack all of this into 300 pages. Not a single word feels wasted. This is an accomplishment, and it comes with a full set of cards. This is like buying every single D&D book and the spell card pack for $60
for every class too.
For your budget. This is an incredible deal.
Yeah,
run, don't walk.
Dungeons and Dragons spell book cards for just arcane spells. It is $50 for those on Amazon right now, and so you'll need another pack of that plus 3 books. Plus
3 books.
You get the PDF with this, and the cards come in a nice holder, and like Rob already mentioned, like the layout, the organization, the art of the book is incredible. The art on the cards is incredible. When we got the play test, every card had the same art, and I was like, I'm just not ignoring this. This doesn't matter. Now they all have their own art, and it feels like, and they also have like a common style across the domains, like a Magic the Gathering card. You know how the green monsters all have the green tint? It's the same in here. It's visually very appealing.
I have to mention that the book does not include one thing that we always highlight, which is a starting adventure, but there is a free starting adventure on the website, which is good. And so that's fine. It also, there are printable character sheets, blank maps. You can print the cards from the website. It's all on the SRD. This is it's the whole shebang.
And I know we've mentioned this before. They released this book without, borrowing $5 million from people as investors and pre-orders on Kickstarter, which is fine. I like most game companies, even established ones, have to do that to be in business these days. But the fact that they didn't, and again, not every company has the luxury of this even being an option, but they easily could have. And it would have raised a lot of money, but they didn't. And I have to give them kudos for that.
Everything that we mentioned being concerned about in our review of the playtest, I feel like they addressed pretty thoroughly. This is they really spent that time well. This is great.
Yeah. I mentioned the 2 things I was worried about from the playtest that I'm less worried about after revisions and a playtest of my own. I would try this game out. This is a hard recommend from me. A recommend with hope, I suppose.
That's right. That's same for me. Recommend with hope. This is good. I am probably going to try to play test this with some people. There's a lot of heart in this one too, which sounds cheesy, but I mean it in the best way. Like, people who care about games and care about their product made this game. They wanted to make a good game. that communicated something about like how they like to play and like the games that they like to play in and the people that they like to play with. And that's cool. I like that.
It's very there. It's like, hey, these are some people who have played Fate and they have played Blades in the Dark.
Blades in the Dark, 13th Age. Yeah, and they
called them out and they made a game that draws on those but is clearly very different because it's like, hey, we like those fun combat scenes in high fantasy games where there's all sorts of crazy things happening. What if we made a game that drew on some of those other systems but also had all of this fun character building and action narrative combat?
Yeah.
That's the first half of Daggerheart. Stay tuned for the Dungeon Master and world building advice section. And if you like or dislike the system, have some thoughts about it, drop us a line, dmofnone@gmail.com.
Hop on the Discord, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dungeonmasterofnone. Even if you don't want to go out and buy the book, remember there is an SRD. So if you want to double check our work, see if we're full of shit, you can go and take a look yourself at the rules. I encourage you to do so if you are a D&D player. Thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, keep rolling them dice.
With hope.